This is how Bob McDonnell ran for governor of Virginia. This was his campaign vehicle when he ran. It's an RV, and you can see it's got kind of a vinyl wrap paint job there, showing him and his wife and all of their 5 kids. Bob McDonnell ran as a family values conservative. He finished up his political ads by flagging on screen the McDonnell family. The McDonnell family, to make the case that his family was basically the bottom line and maybe the most important reason to vote for him. And at his home base on places like the 700 Club televangelist TV show, Bob McDonnell explained how his family values agenda was going to change the state of Virginia with him in public office.
The defense of marriage, a constitutional amendment for Virginia.
It is. 19 out of 19 states that have had it on the ballot have passed it so far. We just think this is vitally important in Virginia. From the Garden of Eden to 2006, we believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, but because of some social trends out there and some court decisions, Pat, as you know, marriage is under attack.
Bob McDonnell, the politician to save marriage in Virginia. Vote for marriage. Vote for Bob. That interview on the 700 Club, that took place when Bob McDonnell was Attorney General of Virginia before he had started running for governor. But his whole political origin, how he got his start in politics and how he leapt from the state assembly to attorney general to governor to vice presidential prospect, right? This was basically his trajectory was that he was the guy from the 700 Club. He was the family values guy who went to televangelist Pat Robertson's college as an adult student. When Bob McDonnell wanted to leave his old life behind and get a start in conservative Republican politics, he went to Pat Robertson's televangelist university.
Tell me about what Regent did to prepare you for this, or did it do anything?
It was a great 4 years here. It gave me the insight into what our founders believed about government and about their view of the Constitution that I am carrying forth on the job today. It gave me a great understanding of the limited role of government and the important roles of the church and the family and the other institutions in society and what happens if government tries to take on those roles and can often make a mess. But also gave me the real importance as being a Christian elected official, that it's not just what you say, but it's also the style of how you say it and acting in a degree of civility and trying to build bridges to get things done without compromising principle, and adopting those principles I learned at Regent has made me very effective both in the General Assembly and I think now as Attorney General. I'm grateful for my training here.
I'm glad. How come you chose Regent? You went to Notre Dame.
Well, I saw this guy named Pat Robertson on the 700 Club talking about this fine university in Virginia Beach, and being a native Virginian, I thought what a great place to learn the foundational principles of our country in a Christian atmosphere, and then to be able to use that to serve the public. I thought what a great place to train, and so it was a great decision, and the principles I've learned here are taking me forward in my public life.
Well, we're thrilled you did, and I guess it's a little premature to talk about the future, but you like the job, it might be something else down the road.
Well, there are other opportunities, but the best thing I can do is be the best Attorney General that I can be. If I do that, the Lord will open up other doors for me.
The Lord and Pat Robertson, in part, did open up other doors for Bob McDonnell and his family values, crusading conservative career. It ascended from there. I mean, as a state legislator, he had been a crusading anti-abortion activist. He sponsored or co-sponsored 35 different anti-abortion bills. As Attorney General, he authored that anti-gay marriage constitutional amendment, and he got it put on the ballot. As a candidate for governor, he had a little hitch when the Washington Post reported on the thesis that he'd written as an adult student at Pat Robertson's university, because that thesis explained his view that public policy should be designed to punish cohabitators, homosexuals, and fornicators in favor of straight married people. But he overcame that hitch when that was reported, and he didn't win election as governor of Virginia in 2009. Once he was elected, in no time, he used his new authority as governor to rescind the state's hiring protections for gay people. He overtly changed state policy to remove protections that previously were in place that said you couldn't be fired for being gay. Bob McDonnell got elected governor and immediately moved to change that policy to overtly say, yes, you can be fired for being gay in Virginia. The legislature then started moving forward on some of the governor's other pet issues, including legislation that he had sponsored as a legislator that would require Virginia women to have a medically unnecessary state-mandated intravaginal ultrasound exam at the order of the state if they wanted to have an abortion in the state of Virginia. There was somewhat of a national uproar about the forced ultrasound bill in Virginia. Governor McDonnell was asked about it over and over again. He earned himself the nickname Governor Ultrasound with this legislation. Eventually, he did sign the forced ultrasound legislation in Virginia, but he said in the end it didn't have to be a forced vaginal ultrasound. It just had to be a forced ultrasound of some kind. And then after that, he and his Attorney General, Ken Cuccinelli, moved forward with their plan for new state regulations to close almost all the abortion clinics in the state of Virginia. Bob McDonnell in Virginia was the family values governor from the 700 Club. And he governed as the family values governor from the 700 Club. After graduating from Pat Robertson's school with his anti-fornicators pro-marriage thesis, he served on the board of trustees at the Pat Robertson School for 8 years thereafter. The last job Bob McDonnell is on record as having, as recently as this year, is as a visiting professor at Liberty University. Liberty University is the other televangelist university in Virginia, other than the Pat Robertson one. Liberty is the one that Bob McDonnell works at now, and that's the one that was founded by Jerry Falwell. Now that Bob McDonnell has been convicted on these corruption charges and he's looking at decades in prison potentially, there's all this coverage today about the decline and fall of Bob McDonnell as a national politician. And there has been a decline and fall of Bob McDonnell as a national politician, but that's not the only thing going on here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Bob McDonnell. 11 days ago, I was honored to be sworn in as the 71st governor of Virginia.
It is a remarkable fall. I mean, the same guy got tapped to give the national State of the Union response, as he just said there, 11 days after the start of his term as governor. And the same guy, 10 days after the end of his term as governor, got indicted on 14 felony counts. It's a remarkable fall from a national perspective, including the very near miss of Mitt Romney considering him as his vice presidential running mate just 2 years ago now. But that square-jawed, good hair, looks like a reasonable guy appeal that made the National Republican Party pick out Bob McDonnell as the one they wanted to show off, as an appealing Republican leader who seemed like a good new face for the Republican Party, what that always ignored, and what I think is in some cases being ignored today in the reaction to the verdict, what that doesn't tell you is really who he was and how he got himself into a position of power in the first place. Not in the national press, not in national politics, but in Virginia specifically. And who he was and how he became governor really was through the televangelist, hardcore, social conservative family values power structure in which he promised that he would be the man to save marriage in Virginia, that his personal family values would become the public policy of the state of Virginia. He would remake the state's Christian morality in the image of his own Christian family and his own Christian marriage. That is how Bob McDonnell became Bob McDonnell. That's how National Republicans even ever got his phone number. That's how he rose to power in Virginia. That's who he was. And then when we got the first revelations about this businessman being the one who paid for the catering at his daughter's wedding, when Bob McDonnell said that he'd paid for the catering. And then it turned out it wasn't just the catering at the wedding. It was $50,000, $70,000, $120,000 in loans. It was tens of thousands of dollars of clothes and shoes and golf clubs and golf bags and long trips to vacation homes and the white Ferrari and the engraved Rolex and all the rest of it. When it came time for Bob McDonnell to mount a defense to federal charges that he sold his office for that cash and those gifts and trips and those luxuries, which he took for himself and his family in exchange for official acts to help the man who paid him. When it came time to mount a defense, then what became the most salient and fundamental thing to know about this case and this corruption, and not just the human failing at the center of it, but the national American politics that explain it in the first place, the most important thing to know about what happened here is that Governor Ultrasound, the governor from the 700 Club, decided when he got faced with these charges that the way he was going to fight these charges, the way he was going to save his own skin, was to leave his wife. The governor's defense to these charges was built almost entirely on attacking his wife. He tried to blame her for taking the bribes. He called defense witnesses who referred to his wife as crazy and mentally ill, and in one case, as a nutbag. He told the jury that he was lonely because his wife actually loved another man and not him. She loved the man who gave them all these things and all this cash. And that adulterous crush is what brought all of this horrible prosecution down on the godly good governor in the first place. He was so good. She's the one who did it. And then he really did leave her. He testified, he let slip early on in his first day of testifying in his own defense, that he wasn't even living with his wife anymore. That once the trial started, he had moved in with his priest. And so, yes, Governor Family Values did have a wife who, like him, was on trial for more than a dozen felony counts and was facing decades in prison. But he left her during the trial so he could focus on his own defense. He left her alone at what presumably was the worst time of her life, so he could serve up a defense for the nation to feast on that blamed it all on her and derided her publicly as crazy and incompetent. And maybe he only faked leaving her and faked his public humiliation of her for legal effect. Maybe it was real. Who knows? But despite all those years of how he became who he is, right, that whole awe-inspiring political ascendance based on family values piety and the lectures to Virginia residents about their bad relationships and bad living arrangements and the infinite superiority of Bob's own family values. Yes, Virginia, when you got Bob McDonnell, this really is what you got. One last thing to show you. In January, the Washington Post reported this. McDonnell rejected plea deal to face one felony, spare wife any charges, and avoid trial. In the course of the federal investigation into Bob McDonnell's corruption in the governor's mansion, prosecutors at one point offered him a chance to spare his wife, and mostly to spare himself. They proposed that the governor plead guilty to just one fraud charge, and it was a fraud charge that had nothing to do with corruption in office. If he did that, his wife would avoid all charges altogether. Quote, the governor rejected the offer. And instead, he and his wife were put up on 14 felony charges. And today they were convicted on almost everything.